and welcome back. My name is Ashley and I'm a mom of 2 little girls. I have a 6-year-old named Kylie and I also have a 4-year-old named Mia. For today's video, I'm going to be answering a question that I have received a countless number of times over the last couple of years. And I was asked this question again very recently, which is kind of what brought it to mind for me. I think honestly, I've probably touched on this in some of my previous Q&A videos, but I've never actually dedicated a video to just this question by itself, but it seems to be coming up again and again, and it's an important one. So I figured let's go ahead and do this. So from one busy parent to another, today I would like to talk to you about what to do when you are trying to parent the Montessori way, but your partner isn't totally on board. Okay, so for this video, I am using the word partner to refer to the other person that you're trying to get on board with Montessori parenting, but I don't necessarily mean your partner. It might be somebody that you just consider more of a co-parent. It might be your child's nanny or caregiver that they see every day. It might be your once or twice a week babysitter. It could be your in-laws, your own parents, basically anybody who your child is spending a significant chunk of their time with throughout the week. These people are all important parts of your child's life. And so obviously we want as many of them as possible to be on board with the way that we've decided to parent our child. This way they are getting as consistent of a message as possible. No matter who your child goes to, everything kind of sounds and feels the same to them. And that is extremely helpful, of course. So I am often asked the question, like, what do I do? I'm on board, I want to do this, but my partner is not, or my nanny is not, or maybe your child goes to see your in-laws quite frequently and your in-laws are not on board. What do I do? Where do I go from there? And that is a fair question. Now, unfortunately, there is no one single answer to this question. Much as I wish there was, life is so much more complicated than that. Humans are so much more complicated than that. And so sometimes we just have to work with what we've got and be a little creative at other times and remind ourselves that it's okay if things aren't perfect and things don't always go as we have planned. So with that said, I'm going to give you 4 things to think about as you are trying to get these other important people in your child's life on board. So the first one is the power of modeling, to lead by example. This is the single most powerful tool that you have as your child's advocate to help bring other people on board. Because you can talk at them all day long about Montessori, but if they can see Montessori in action with their very own eyes, that is going to speak volumes. Actions speak louder than words, always. And so you basically just want to do you. Like, don't worry about the other people there and the fact that they're watching you, although that can be kind of unnerving sometimes, but just kind of like go about your day. Do the things you would normally do with your child. Interact with them the same way that you normally would, and let them see it for themselves. Let them see how independent your child can be. Let them see like how you talk to your child and the general level of mutual respect that you have cultivated with your child. If you have more than one child, let them see how you help them to peacefully resolve conflicts. Let them see all of this for themselves. And then they will, I can almost guarantee you, come to you with questions like, oh, wow, I noticed that you said this, this, and this. Why did you say it like that? Or, wow, I had no idea that he could do that all by himself. Because a lot of people, it's just not on their radar that children can do these kinds of like independent tasks at home and whatnot. They don't even really think about it, because in olden times, it was children should be seen and not heard, and adults do everything for the child because they're incapable. That was the way of thinking back in the day, and not so in the Montessori approach. We know that children are incredibly capable when given the appropriate environment and the freedom within limits to do so. And so make it happen. Just let them see it, let them see the magic, and I guarantee you that will open up the avenues of conversation that you're hoping to have so that you can eventually get them on board. And even if it doesn't necessarily get that process started right away, over time, I think these other people will take notice of the kind of relationship that you have with your child. They will take notice of your child's growing independence. And even if they aren't fully on board, they will pick up bits and pieces here and there of things that they've seen happening that they know your child can do for themselves. And I think it'll kind of help to smooth the way a little bit better. So leading by example is always a fantastic strategy to use. And I also think it helps to keep in mind that this is exactly what we would be doing if we were in a Montessori classroom as well. We lead by example. We exhibit the behaviors that we want the children to emulate. And we guide them, we model the lessons that we want to teach them, and then we give them opportunities to practice and repeat. And it's the same thing just with these other people. We're modeling the behavior we want to see, we're showing them how we interact with our child, and then we give them opportunities to practice doing it themselves. So it's kind of the same thing, kind of some sneaky Montessori stuff in there. Okay, moving on. So the second strategy that I want you to be thinking about is education. Really, for a lot of people, not being on board with Montessori is because they just don't know enough about it. People don't know what they don't know, right? So what you can do then is to be the influencing party who comes in and says, here, I have some of this amazing information about Montessori to share with you so that you can learn more about it, so that we can be on the same team. And you, the benevolent giver of information, can provide them with resources that are tailored to their style of learning, because you probably have a pretty good idea of how these different individuals prefer to learn. And if you're not sure, then just make your best guess and, cross your fingers and see how they respond. But what I'm getting at here is you probably don't want to give your elderly in-laws a tome of a book to read, because they might not be into that. They might be better off with a shorter article or a video that you sit them down and show them or send to them if they know how to check email. So yeah, little short bits of information for some people are better. And then other people who maybe are more interested and maybe need a bit of a deeper understanding of Montessori, like perhaps your child's caregiver who they're spending a large chunk of their time with throughout the day. Maybe that's the kind of person that you sit down and say, here's a book that I would love for you to look through and read. Let me know if you have any questions. And you can give them a book. By the way, I have a book that would be great for that, just saying. But yeah, so something that will help them to learn more about Montessori, because the more they know, the more they understand, the more it makes sense. And they're like, oh, that's why they're doing it that way. When they understand the why behind the things you're doing, then it helps them to get on board. And so I really do think that education is an important part of this whole equation, because as we know, humans are creatures of habit. We tend to gravitate toward what makes us feel comfortable, what feels familiar. And for a lot of people, this whole way of doing things in a Montessori home is very unfamiliar. It feels strange and kind of foreign. And so people are like, they kind of shy away from it a bit at first because it doesn't, it's not what they know. But once you can help them learn a little bit more about it, help them to feel more familiar with the way that you do things, then, it opens up those avenues for them to start accepting some of those changes. So the third strategy is one that I feel is like a natural progression from the first two strategies. And that is to have open conversations with these people that you're trying to get on board. Now, I know some people, myself included, actually started with having open conversations, and then I kind of moved into modeling and sharing educational information with my partner and my family members and things like that. And I think that's okay depending on the person. Other people are not going to be as receptive at times when you start with a conversation. They're like, wait, what? You want to do all these crazy things I've never heard of? What are you talking about? Nope, not doing that. I raised you and you turned out fine. So that's just kind of like the mindset some people have if you start there. But instead, for those kinds of people, if you can start with modeling and showing them and then giving them some information, then they are more receptive to the open conversations. And these are the kind of people that this video is geared towards. So if you started with the conversations and found that didn't work, definitely circle back to those conversations after you've tried out some modeling and some educational material with them and see how the conversations go from there. So as awkward as it might feel to sit down and have these conversations, as uncomfortable as it might make some parents feel because they're like, well, I don't want to step on anybody's toes or make anybody feel like they're doing something wrong. You have to remember that this is your child. You are the parent. You have the ultimate end veto over what happens in your child's life. And if this is something that you feel strongly about, then it's worth putting yourself through that, these little periods of feeling uncomfortable and awkward to have those conversations to try to get everybody on board. It is worth it. But I do also like to caution parents that when you go into these conversations, you want to be mindful of the fact that sometimes these conversations can feel a bit sensitive, depending on who the audience is, who the other person or people are. And so you don't want to barge in and be like, okay, I'm the parent, it's my way or the highway, I don't care what you have to say, because that is immediately going to set up the other person to just, be defensive and shut down. And they're not going to want to listen to what you have to say, because the message that you're basically giving them when you do that is you're doing it wrong and I'm right. And nobody likes to hear that. So you kind of have to plan before you go into these conversations, especially if you have a feeling that it might be more of a difficult one, to go in with a plan and, have some things written down that you want to say, and go into it with an air of teamwork. We are on the same page. Sit on the same side of the table or the couch, wherever you are. Don't sit across from them. Don't put a physical barrier between you. That stuff counts. Sit next to them, sit with them, and kind of look through things together and say, here are some things that I would like to see happening. Here are some changes that I would like to make, and here's why. And what do you think? How can we make this work? Solicit their ideas. Make them feel like part of what you're doing. And that is always going to be a much more helpful approach when you are trying to get somebody to accept some changes that you are trying to implement. Now, let's say that you have done all three of those first three strategies beautifully. You have modeled the Montessori at home approach for them to observe. You have provided them with educational materials that they have hopefully consumed, and you've sat them down and had those open, honest conversations about the changes that you would like to see implemented. Even if you have done all of those things, sometimes you will find that there are just some people who are very set in their ways. They are resistant, stubborn, you might call them. They just are not willing to get on board with the Montessori approach. Unfortunately, that will happen sometimes. And one of those people might be a really important part of your child's life. And again, as unfortunate as it is, there's really honestly not much you can do about it, because at the end of the day, it is up to that person to decide to make those changes. You cannot force them to make those changes. You can't change other people for them. They've got to be an active participant in that process. So when that happens, strategy number 4, let it go. It is okay. As I told you at the beginning of the video, you are the most important part of your child's life. You are setting the tone for everything else. You are creating that solid foundation. So what I would say is, in those situations, when you are home with your child, when you do have that one-on-one time with them, just try to make the most of the time that you do have, where you do have that power and influence to kind of make sure things are going the way that you would like for them to go. Continue doing what you would normally do. Even if those naysayers are present during those times, just focus on your child. Focus on what you know to be important, and make sure that the environment and your interactions are ideal in your eyes. Just do what you can with the time that you have, and try not to worry too much about all of the other time, because you're going to give yourself a lot of stress that you can't necessarily change anything about. And that's not good for you or for your child, because they pick up on our emotions and our general feelings, and we don't want to create like this anxiety and this tension between you and these other important people. Just do what you can with what you've got. Just let go of the rest. And I can promise you, your child will be okay. And I know that some of you are probably wondering, wouldn't that be kind of confusing for my child to have 2 totally different environments, different expectations in those environments? And to that, I would say yes and no. I think it could be potentially really confusing, depending on the age of your child, and also whether or not you're sitting them down and having conversations with your child about those differences. Because kids are really receptive and resilient. It's very easy to sit a child down, and if they start asking, well, how come I can't do XYZ? Grandma and grandpa let me do that. They let me watch TV or have candy, whatever it is, Why can't I do that? It's very easy to say, well, that's just not what we do in our home. You know, in our family, we have screen time, you know, after lunch or whatever your rule is, you know, or we only have dessert on Fridays or whatever it is. You know, you just kind of explain to your child the way things are, and you do it in a very neutral, matter of fact, kind of like you would talk about why we brush our teeth. You know, it's a non-negotiable. This is just the way we do things. And yeah, maybe grandma and grandpa let you do things a little bit differently, or maybe dad lets you do something a little bit differently, but this is the way we do things when mom is around, or, you know, when we go to dad's house, or whatever the situation is. I think you guys get what I'm getting at here. Just have those conversations with your child and explain the differences to them. It's easier for them to go along with when they kind of understand the why behind it, and it's like very clearly spelled out for them. From my perspective, it's really not that much different to a child than, say, doing Montessori at home and sending them to a more traditional school where they aren't doing anything Montessori. They're very easily able to pick up on the fact that, like, okay, this is the way things are done at school, and this is the way things are done at home, and they can draw that line. And so when they have an understanding of those differences, that can really help them to kind of figure out what the expectations are in the different environments and to adapt accordingly. Okay, friends, so I hope you found these strategies helpful. If you did, then please be sure to give this video a thumbs up. And if you'd like more practical tips and advice for implementing Montessori at home with your children, then you might also consider subscribing to my channel. This way you don't miss a new video. My book, The Montessori Home, Create a Space for Your Child to Thrive, is now available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook on Amazon and in all major book retailers. I also have several e-courses, an online community just for Montessori parents where I do live group coaching sessions once a month. And for anyone who is looking for some more individualized support, I also offer one-on-one coaching sessions. So links to all of those resources will be in the description box down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.